The Paula Show is on. The Paula Show. Come on, one and all. I extend an invitation to the Paula Show. Join in the conversation. Transforming behavior, recognizing our savior, overcoming hurdles, achieving dreams. Together we can succeed.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Paula Show. I'm pleased to introduce part 2 of our leadership conversation with Jameel Jonathan Lee and Cathrona Samuel. Stay with us. We'll be right back after this commercial break. Thank you for staying with us on The Paula Show. Remember to watch The Paula Show via CTV Channel 2 on Tuesday nights at 9, and on Sundays there's a rebroadcast at 1 in the afternoon. The Paula Show inspires, entertains, and transforms behavior. Also remember to like me on Facebook, The Paula Show. Miss Samuel, which is the most effective form of communication? Conversation, emails, or ignore the issues? They'll get around to it.
Conversation is definitely important. I know email has its place, or documentation has its
Yes.
place, because within the corporate structure, for instance, you do have to create a paper trail.
Definitely.
But conversation is important. Emails are impersonal, and a leader who just hopes that the issue will roll over or blow away is obviously afraid of confrontation.
Yes.
And doesn't want to deal with the matter at hand. Conversation is important. Discussions are important. And I find it's very important to be able to do it by placing yourself in the other person's shoes. Because often we go into discussions and we have a clear perception, or we think we have a clear perception of what's going on and what the person is thinking of and how it should be addressed. And we get into the discussion and we realize, well, obviously, we are seeing things completely differently. And I need to step back from what I think.
Don't be judgmental.
Yes, definitely. Because you can go into a conversation thinking, I've sized this up.
Yes.
And it may be
Totally
black and white.
different.
Like, it may be
Yeah.
an issue where the employee, for instance, does need to be reprimanded
Yeah.
or disciplined. But inside of the conversation, you have to figure out how that should be done. And there have been many discussions when you go in and you're ready to lay down the hammer. But you
Yes.
realize when you delve deeper, compassion is
Like
required,
somebody
understanding.
is arriving to work every day late, but it didn't happen over the last few years. It just started happening, and you're wondering what's going on. You write a letter, you make a note, you speak with the person, and then eventually you realize that person has a
an ailing
mother
mother.
with Alzheimer's disease, and it's becoming, worse and worse and worse, and that person is so frustrated. What that person needs right now is empathy,
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
a penalty.
Right.
Empathy.
And leaders who are not willing to converse also push employees away. So employees will determine that, okay, this is the status quo. I have a leader that I can't talk to, and situations will just fester. Or even inside of an environment where there is the opportunity to speak, they might not be open enough to say what they want to say because the leader has not communicated that
Leader
they're
intimidates.
approachable, that they're sympathetic, that they are understanding. So, and it's difficult, especially if leadership is new for you, to have that first conversation. I know how that feels, that
Yes.
first confrontation, that
Yeah.
first time when you have to sit with the employee and eyeball to eyeball, tell
Yeah.
them, listen, we need to deal with this. It's tough, but it is important. It's
Yeah.
necessary.
And communication has to be constant. You can't communicate something once. So you may have communicated it before. There has to be the reinforcing and the reminders.
And the feedback.
Yeah, so that people know that this is really and truly the position or the heart of my leader. And I think especially those crisis moments, leaders should not be afraid of them, because those crisis moments are the ones that really define your leadership and help people to truly see who you are. And so when everything went into chaos and the employee was really out of line, but how did you deal with me
Bring
as a
order to
leader
the situation.
in that situation really helps me to know as the follower who you are.
With leadership comes great responsibility.
Definitely.
Don't be afraid of blame. And I have here, accept, apologize. And if you have to openly do it, it's okay. But the point I want to speak about here is being afraid of blame. Too many leaders, when things are going well, everything is going hunky-dory, as they say. Oh, present please. And as soon as things start to fall out of whack, it's not me, it's Miss Cathrona, it's Jameel, it's everybody else. I'm squeaky clean. That's not cool.
Of course, that's not true leadership. And you might recall that when you asked for my definition, one of the things that I would have stated that I see leadership in being is responsibility. The truth is, when there's praise, the praise really should be collectively shared with the team. But the leader must be strong and must have a broad back that when it's time to take responsibility for something that's going awry, you stand up and you take it, and it may not even necessarily be you, but you take the responsibility, and then
for
you
your
do
team.
what is necessary to evaluate and to resolve the situation and to ensure that as much as is possible that there isn't a repeat. But you must take responsibility, and I think that is what people need to understand, that leadership is not about privilege. The privileges are given because of the weight of responsibility that the leader carries. But anyone who desires the role of leadership or is going to take the helm of any organization, unit, group,
or even
whatever
becoming a parent,
whatever it may be, you must understand, I am taking responsibility for the outcomes of this thing.
Samuel?
You know, I think it's a challenge that especially persons who are new to leadership have. If you are a young professional and you're being exposed to leadership for the first time, you've been promoted based on your merit, and you're very used to being commended and being given adulation and praise. And inside of a leadership role where you realize that you are not responsible for everyone's actions, and people may not always comply with every directive that you give, then you have to take the fall for someone else's misstep.
But you have to be very mature in order to think that way, because there are people who will say, but it's not my fault, I'm not accepting the blame. And here your team members are hearing you as a leader, blaming them. I mean, how comforting is that?
It isn't, and it creates a very uncomfortable environment where they don't feel sheltered, and you create the environment and the culture where everybody has to look out for themselves.
And that is why for the email, you have a trail and you copy everybody and you blind copy everybody else, because you don't trust your leader.
Yeah, that's unfortunate.
Sounds like a dysfunctional organization.
Definitely, and I want to be clear, in taking responsibility doesn't mean that you are allowing things to go awry. Yeah, you do need to check into what happened, and still as well hold the individuals who may have erred accountable. But what we're not doing as leaders is throwing them under the bus. That's two different situations.
You're going beneath the bus with them.
Well, let's stay away from the bus.
No, but if anyone does have to go under the bus, the leader should be. Yeah.
I like that. We're staying away from the bus
as
much as possible.
Let's just stay away
but
from
if
the
we
bus.
have to go beneath the bus, we are going together. That sounds like teamwork as well. Thank you for staying with us on the Polish Show. We are here helping to build good leadership skills. So thank you for staying with us. We'll be right back after this commercial break. Thank you for staying with us on the Polish Show. Tonight we're speaking about leadership. And I read this today. Real leaders may not ever make the headlines. But if you're a real leader, you should make the headline at some point.
Depends on the level of leadership to which you attain. But there are many real leaders who
never make the headlines.
Right, and we said that. We spoke about just the individual who's leading their family. You may never make the headlines, but you are able to create an environment in your home where everyone feels comfortable and they're able to grow and they're able to develop and become their best selves. You won't make the headlines, but you are a true leader.
You get results.
Yeah, I think at the other end of the spectrum, there are also the leaders who are just content to push others forward, to support and to coach in the background, and allow others to be seen and
To make the
recognized as
headlines.
well. And I think that comes from a great level of maturity.
Yeah.
And humility too, because
Yes.
you're contributing to others'
Yeah.
progress, and you don't necessarily
And
want the
internal
accolades.
security.
Yeah.
And internal
And
security.
not only that, real leaders understand collaboration. So they don't aim for the spotlight. It's really about putting the team forward and the efforts of the team and not really standing out.
Wow. Sounds good tonight. But hear this. Bad work ethics. CNN polled a number of persons and they said that procrastination was #1 on the list of bad work ethics. So in this segment, we're talking about what leaders can learn from other leaders. Certainly, we don't want to learn procrastination.
But I think that true leaders are driven, and that internal drive and passion does not give way to procrastination. I think usually what happens, from my experience and from those that I've interacted with and even those that I would have read, etc., it's almost as if you have to be reined in. You have to rein in yourself and slow down. And sometimes,
I need to get
you know,
some sleep. It's 2 in the morning.
or sometimes even, just slow down the pace to make sure that your team is progressing with you,
Because you're
the
so
leader,
enthusiastic
yes,
about what you're
and
doing.
you're going and you're
Yes.
interacting with this thing and you're down the road and then remembering, wait, my team is not here yet,
Yeah.
so slow it down. There's no room for procrastination inside of that, not when you are driven by purpose.
Okay, Samuel?
And I'm thinking that there could also be perceptions of procrastination. Because as a leader, sometimes you do have to slow things down. And the people you lead may not initially understand why you have to slow things down.
Yes.
But it's really because you want to be able to assess things properly. You want to shift the focus. There's something that needs to be adjusted. So sometimes
It's
employees
important.
can have a perception that a leader is procrastinating
When you're delaying for a purpose.
for a purpose. And I guess that's where communication comes into play.
Yes.
Always maintain that dialogue
Yeah.
so that you can know if we're slowing things down, it's because there's something that we really have to address and get the team on board in slowing down as well.
As opposed
Yeah.
to expecting people to understand what's happening in the silence.
Right.
Yes. Lack of coordination between leadership. We don't want to learn that. Sometimes you have the board, the CEO, then you have the managers and you have the supervisors. There's no coordination, none whatsoever.
Or sometimes you have a lack of coordination between different agencies that
Yes.
may overlap in terms of their responsibilities.
I find that a lot of times leaders don't take the time to come together to ensure that they have really collaborated on what their common goals and objectives are.
Yes.
So everyone at different levels has a completely different set of objectives.
I know.
Because there's not that vision that comes from the top and that then flows down so that everyone can be working towards the same thing. And
Common
then there are
goals.
Common goals. And then there are different personality types and different leadership styles that affect leaders really being able to coordinate as well. And so I feel like there just needs to be a bit more dialogue. And I know we
Yes.
all see that issue, especially within our society. There's just not that level of dialogue and that collaboration and coming together to really decide what our vision is going to be.
Too much
And what we're
chaos.
going to pursue. And then that's communicated to the employees.
Yes.
Leadership is a dance.
What is it?
it is-
Flamenco, samba,
I don't know, but it is-
reggae?
It can be all of those things, right? It is a dance. As you navigate your way through the different approaches, the different personality styles, etc. Sometimes you've got to learn, even as a cricketer, which balls to bat and which ones to just let slide.
So which was
you-
the fight?
You have to be very discerning and be clear. Be clear on what are the objectives, and you're looking for that place of commonality, that place of agreement, so that we can work together. And just as Ms. Sam was saying, look, it takes a lot of discussion. And sometimes the time that the discussions would take can seem time consuming, but in the long run, they are really necessary.
And sometimes you have to know when to engage in the conversation, the right time. The timing is important, because sometimes people are upset and annoyed, and if you introduce a conversation at that particular point, never mind how valid it is, you might get a shout, you might get a shut down, but if the person is in a quiet space, the person might be more willing to listen. So timing is everything as well. Learn to speak and write effectively as a leader.
That's a learned skill.
Yeah.
And
you have to read.
Yeah, and it requires a lot of practice too. Requires practice, because again, people receive things differently.
How
And so
about
you
writing
also
simpler? Instead of sending an email with 15-letter words and trying to make everybody think that you're so brilliant, how about just simplifying it?
I agree. Of course, sometimes the attempt may not necessarily to make people feel that you are brilliant. I know that there's some who try very hard to just fill it with. For others, it could as well, because you might be an avid reader, right, that you naturally develop a certain vocabulary and that you utilize in your regular speech. And so even simplifying may become a very deliberate act.
Well, be
that
deliberate.
You have.
I think it's important as a leader to know your audience.
Yes.
I may love to write a novel, but I'm very aware of the fact that, for instance, in my current context, I lead millennials. And that's the social media generation, essentially. That's accustomed to taking things in bite-sized pieces and may not be able to process the 20-page manifesto.
Oh my God.
Obviously, we're trying to kill that culture, because we don't want them to bring the emojis into the workplace. But it's really finding that medium, that happy medium, where we can create a space to communicate, where we're communicating professionally, but they're also understanding and they're also embracing. And there are mediums that you can utilize to do that. So I think the audience is very important. Another example is, for instance, so in an organization like APO, you have a lot of field workers who, because of the structure of their day, they're not going to have the time to take up a 10-page document and scan through. So
simplify the brochure.
Or you might have to just get in front of a camera and record a short video and then transmit it through whatever channels that you have. So just learning to be creative.
We have a lot of options. A lot of options, more than we did in the past.
But of course, on the other side of that, as the leader who may become the face of your organization, or at least you will be representing your organization in certain arenas, etc. Sometimes there are the jargons, the technical terms, etc., that you must know and be able to utilize effectively, depending on the environment as well that you may find yourself
and that goes back to a particular point that, well, I haven't mentioned it as yet, but know your industry. You have to know your industry. Do not be resistant to change. I like Who Stole My Cheese. You read that book?
Yes, I did.
And I read it, reread it. I thought, who stole my cheese? Please, what is this?
Yes, the subject was...
Yeah, what is this? I think my boss, Davidson Charles...
recommended it to you?
Not recommended it, but he actually gave it to me as a gift. And
he was a good leader.
Yes, he gave me several books. Yeah. We got along. We got along. We had our differences, but we got along because I understood him and he understood me. Give me my space to do my work, please. I do not want anyone crowding me and micromanaging. Give me my space, please. And I delivered. You see, we're all different. Somebody else might have wanted the attention and the coaching and the mentoring, but I didn't need that.
Of course, he was mentoring to an extent
by
giving the books.
Well, I guess so.
But it was the method that was necessary
Right.
for you.
What did I take away from that book? Release the old cheese in order to acquire new cheese, and don't be afraid to make the change. And I know what it is to make change. 25 and a half years, and I decided no more, no more. And let me tell you, what I'm doing now, I love it so much that I wish I could have a daily show.
Maybe one day.
Now maybe one day.
It will happen?
Oh, how
excellent.
it will happen. We seal the deal tonight. It will happen. So you read Who Moved My Cheese. I read it. What's a book that you might have read that has left an impression on you?
So I've never read Who Stole My Cheese.
We'll
I've
gift
seen it
to
on
you.
many vlogs and blogs
Yeah.
and shows. I'll probably get it on iBooks one day.
Yeah.
I have really been inspired by a book called From Good to Great by Jim Collins. It was a study on leadership in the 90s. And at first I was quite hesitant to get the book because I wasn't sure if anything from the 90s would be really relevant for today.
Today.
But the values remain the same. And it really looked at, it was a practical case study of companies that made it and companies that failed.
I think I read that book too.
And it was really centered on the leadership style. So it looked at, I remember it began with this, the leader of an organization, or he really took the organization to another level. And he was considered an introvert. He was very quiet. He didn't like the limelight. And he was the most unlikely candidate for the job because he wasn't charismatic and energetic. But he was focused.
Yeah.
He believed in teamwork. He
Yes.
believed in collaboration. He was able to motivate the employees to take the company to another level. He wasn't the only leader, but there were a couple others.
Yes.
But I really found that book to be quite inspirational.
What's the name of the book again for someone who
So
might
that's
be
From
listening?
Good to Great by Jim Collins.
Good to Great.
Yes.
We read Slight Edge. We read Who Moved My Cheese. And there's also another one, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Yes, we share books.
Okay.
What's that last one we're reading about money?
Millionaire Map.
Millionaire Map. Let's exchange books. I have a huge library of books. Some I may never read in my lifetime. But if I see a book and I think that it could be, you know, valuable to my collection, I'm getting that. I don't know when I'm going to read it, but
I
I'm
have
getting
an
it.
ebook collection, so I'm not sure how the exchanging books is going to
I'm
work.
not the ebook
I-
type.
I can probably send you a link.
I'm not the ebook type, but that book sounds
I
interesting.
think the point to really be made here, though, is that if leaders are going to be effective, they must read.
Must
and
read.
They must read
Yeah.
widely, whether
Yeah.
print or
Ebook,
but
yeah.
they must read and keep advancing.
Yeah.
And I like what you said about not being resistant to change.
Yes.
Because leadership is active, it's dynamic, and it's an ongoing process.
Yes.
And there may be the time where we need to step back and just reassess our leadership style, do a refresher. So yes, you might have been in leadership for 20 years and there's a understanding the basics of leadership course that's
Yes.
available. Don't shrink back from that. Do the refresher course because you never know, there may be something that you have missed. I know I've done those courses.
And there's so many
And
online
yes,
for free as well.
Yeah, and that has been refreshing. It assisted me in changing my approach, dealing with very diverse employees. So always be open to learning.
And I love Harvard Business Review too.
Yeah.
And you know, I don't know if we're at this point, but I'm sitting here and I'm thinking, I wouldn't want persons to think that even as we're discussing, that we're the perfect leaders that are out there.
Not at all. My
right?
children would say, no, not that, mommy. And some of my employees may say, no, not that, Paula, because sometimes you have to do what I said, I think in the first or second segment. You have to say a definitive yes or a definitive no. And people don't particularly like that. They like gray areas.
That's
I
true.
don't do gray areas. It's yes or no. I like it or I don't like it.
Yeah.
Let's move on. Yes?
And so someone might be listening and thinking, wow, you know, I'm not like them and I'm just this horrible leader. But I would want to suggest, listen, it is a learning process.
Yes.
It's a learning process no matter where you are. And just as Mr. Moda said, you may have been a leader for 20 years. It doesn't mean that there isn't anything that you can learn. It's a learning process. And so that is why not being resistant to change is so important, because no matter where you find yourself right now, you can grow, you can develop, you can become better.
That is true. My last 2 points for this segment, because they're asking me to wrap up, but I am so excited about my guests. Earn the respect of your colleagues, management, and associates. Stand on your faith principles.
Yes.
Because many professionals do not want people to know that they're Christians. They feel weak, you know, intimidated, telling people I'm following Christ, when it's actually Christ who promotes and demotes, not our bosses. And then my final point, do not discuss confidential matters with family, friends, and associates following management meetings. That is so common.
Unfortunately. I wanted to go back, you know, to the faith principles. The reality is, and I don't have to walk around and tell people that I am a Christian. I think that the life that you live,
The values.
the principles that are exhibited from your life, the guiding principles that determine the decisions that you make, the way you interact with people, they will see Christ
They'll see a
in you,
difference. They'll see
yes
your
or
peculiar.
no. All right, and so inside of those principles, confidentiality is a must. That is how you can be trusted. Can you be trusted with the sensitive information that you are going to be privy to? It's all inside of your life's philosophy and life's principles.
Samuel?
And I'm thinking, yes, you don't have to articulate that you are a believer. It's seen in the way that you live. But I was thinking, it also builds the culture, and it produces Christ in others. Persons will be able to produce those principles and values and will be governed by it. And they may not necessarily become believers, but they're governed by that. And I find that that really does help. You proclaim the standards by the way that you live.
Yes.
Others see it, they're attracted to it. They take on those standards and those principles because they see that it works.
Yeah.
So you bring people into an environment, they see that you have a spirit of collaboration, that you have a humble heart, and they take that on. And I found that that has worked in my experience. I've never had to walk around telling an employee, be humble, collaborate. They see that I love it.
Yes.
They see that
And
those
they
are the things that I
emulate.
treasure, and they emulate.
See, that's what we're talking about all night long. If you are a good leader, then you will have followers. There isn't any good leader without followers, I'm telling you. Thank you for staying with us on The Paula Show. We'll be right back after this commercial break. Tonight on The Paula Show, our conversation is about leadership. And of course, we want to encourage good leadership. Cathrona Samuel is here, and Jameel Lee is here as well. Advancing technology in the 21st century, leaders must be able to use the technology. There's some leaders who can't even switch on a computer.
We have that challenge because you just mentioned that technology moves at a very rapid pace. And there are people within the organization, especially leaders who have been there for a while, that started out in the, what's an early
You
platform?
call them
DOS?
the dinosaur
Yeah,
age.
that started out even before those clunky desktop computers,
yes.
and now have to
Diskettes and so.
rely on a technical, complex information system to execute their everyday tasks. I mean, our payroll is managed by information systems. We have other HR interfacing systems and so forth. So yes, leaders have to really sharpen up and take courses and refresher courses.
And not be
keep
afraid
pace.
to ask for help.
And yes.
You say, and yes.
I was agreeing, not be afraid to ask for help.
Yeah.
The leader does not need to be the expert in everything.
I agree.
And again, that is where the internal security is necessary. Ask for help,
If you
especially
don't know,
if
you just don't know.
And so there might be a younger, technical savvy individual who would love to assist you and to help you and to share. Of course, be careful of
And
those who
you in turn
will
can
run
help
around.
that person in some other way.
Right. Be
Yeah,
careful of those who will run
reciprocate.
around and say, oh, I have to do everything for him. But
Yeah.
But there are those who will be willing to assist and to help. So know your limitations and then find the requisite skill sets and build your team that would help to fill those gaps.
We spoke earlier about keep learning in your industry because there are always emerging issues in your industry. Be responsible when using social media. I was listening to the big issues a couple Sundays ago, and this politician in St. Lucia, he had a reputation of sharing private body parts with young girls. And he was asked to resign. But increasingly, there are persons who are misusing social media, and they're professionals, they're brilliant people. Why?
I think because persons generally don't understand
What,
the implications of publishing something on social media. When we sign up for Facebook, there is a 12-page terms and conditions that's presented to us, that we scroll down to the bottom and we click on accept. And we haven't read that we have granted Facebook and the rest of the world a global perpetual license.
It's amazing that you said that, because I had somebody here speaking about copyright the other night, and he said, read all the fine print that they present to you. I said, that's difficult.
And so we accept that, and we become very comfortable putting everything out on the social media sphere, not understanding that friends have friends who have friends and friends.
Not realizing we've given them permission.
And we have given them permission.
And for anybody else.
And it's there, and it can never be deleted. And so obviously there is that, and well, I don't want to say it happens among the younger leaders, but there is that challenge. I mean, there have been studies done that stated that people lack that sense of awareness and consciousness on social media. We're very cautious in the real world, and we value things like privacy in the real world.
But
we
on
lock
social
our doors
media?
and so forth, but on social media, all restraint goes away.
Although I'm not sure it's just the young leaders. You
No,
know,
because I'm speaking about an older person. Remember, as leaders, we interact with different age groups.
I think we are all very privy to the leader that is considered to be the leader of the free world, and I am not sure that that individual is a responsible social media user.
Not at all, not
and
by a yard.
Nowhere close to a millennial.
He's a very deliberate social media user, and that's a part of his strategy, because traditional media has rejected him.
Exactly.
And he needs a platform to get his message out there.
And he has created a very active
And he has
platform.
an audience who we may scrutinize what he puts out there, but he does have an audience that really appreciates a lot of the messages.
Well, you will always find somebody who will appreciate your,
that
your
is
deliverables.
true. What is your preferred type of leadership? I have coaching, autocratic, transformational, democratic, charismatic. But it might be another one that I haven't mentioned.
For me, I think an eclectic approach is what's best. I don't believe that one should box themselves into a specific approach. You have to be able to discern and just test the environment, test the situation, and see what is necessary.
So sometimes you may
the
use
moment.
autocratic, another time transformational, another time charismatic. It just depends on the situation.
At the end of the day, your goal is you want to meet the objectives, but you also should want to ensure that the people that you are leading are growing along with you.
Okay, Miss Samuel?
Yeah, I think it's important just from the onset as a leader to be able to communicate your character and establish what that is. And then you can fit different approaches into different circumstances. So there might be some situations in which you do have to go in and coach. It's very necessary. There might be some situations where you do need a bit of a democratic approach, especially if the issue is buy-in and you really want buy-in. You're going to open it up and say, let's hear your feedback on how you feel about this, and should we take this route or that route.
Include your team members.
There may be situations where you need to go in and say, this is what we are doing, and I need you to understand that. And we all need to work together towards that. But I think inside of that, once you are consistent in character and personality and they understand who you are, there's not going to be that dissonance and that confusion if you try a different approach here and there. So it's really communicating who you are. Yeah.
And once they're comfortable with you, people will generally follow you. Yes? Leadership is not for the faint-hearted.
Definitely not. Definitely not.
So you're both agreeing.
That if you're
Yeah.
faint-hearted, I mean, you won't last a day.
Wow. One day.
It can get rough. It can get very rough. And sometimes it can feel like a lonely space.
I was about to say, leadership is also a lonely place at times.
It is. It is lonely at times. I think that comes with process and growth as well. And at the onset, there may be decisions that put you into isolation. But at the end of the day, once you have made a principled decision and you can be comfortable with that and you can sleep at night, then you just have
Conscience
to be
cleared.
Yeah, you just have to be able to move forward. But it does get lonely. And there are times when you make the tough decision and no one stands with you.
Yes.
And that can be very, very difficult.
And you feel betrayed.
Yes, yeah.
During
Sort
the-
of like Jesus and Judas.
Leadership is not the place oftentimes of adulation and praise. And the adulations that do come are very often the result of a long process over time when people would have seen you consistently. And so the first few months, the first few years, it may seem as if there are more attacks than
Fraught with
anything else.
conflict.
Yes, but it is important, as Ms. Sam was saying, once you're making principled decisions, stay the course. Stay the course. Be firm. Consistently love
consistent.
your people. Recognize these are the people that you have responsibility for, and if nothing else, they should sense your heart of concern towards them. And in the long term, some may return to say thanks, but at least others, when they're thinking about it, even if they didn't like you, they would say, you know what, he was
Not
fair.
so bad after
He
all.
really was fair.
Yeah. I mean, I've come to look back and appreciate the moments of isolation and the times when difficult decisions had to be made. I've seen what it has produced now because inside of that process, it was able to communicate to persons who I was and who I am. And essentially, I earned respect. So yes, I had to make a tough decision, but I also earned respect. So persons may not have come and been willing to be warm and smiling and friendly. You have to walk alone. but at the end of the day, it communicated who I was. And that's the platform on which I can continue to make decisions.
Earning respect. Volunteering. Do you think each leader should contribute to a community cause or national cause?
An interesting thought. Personally,
Remember, we're building good leaders here.
personally, I see value in volunteering, your time, etc. I don't know that I would make it a requirement of leadership. I can't say that I would make it a requirement
But
of
it's
leadership
helpful.
to say that if you don't volunteer, you won't be a good leader. However, for the leaders who operate in voluntary organizations, they tend to become better leaders simply because you do not have, as the corporate world would have, the issue of payment to
It's done willingly.
yeah. So you
Yeah.
definitely have to learn
So,
how to inspire people.
benefits.
You have to inspire people and cause them to buy into your vision and to your
projects.
goal to give of themselves without these other additives or incentives.
Samuel?
I think it's important to give back. And I think it's important to find the time to give back in some form or fashion. I wouldn't say that it's a prerequisite. And I wouldn't say that because you don't want leaders to feel that they're just doing it out of some kind of obligation
Yes.
or some kind of compulsion. But it's important to give back because as a leader, there would be so much value that you would have gained along the way. There's so much you've learned. And it really does help to be able to give back in some form and fashion. To be able to share your process with others outside of your regular 9-to-5 context. To be able to share life with others. So giving back is definitely important.
You're both making an impact every day. Think about it. How are you making an impact every day? For me, I believe first impressions are lasting. So even a simple trip to the grocery store, I have to put it together because I have a personal brand to maintain. So I don't want to look as if, it's an off day. Because someone might be seeing me for the first time and I want that impression to be lasting. Good. Grooming is important to me. Speaking, smile. I find a smile disarms people. Be honest, encourage others, and consistently be reminded of Jehovah's purpose for my life.
One of the things that is ever on my mind very recently is that aspect of self-control, and we see that in the scriptures as one of the characteristics of the fruit of the Spirit. And I'm very mindful that there are young people who watch me on a daily basis, and they're watching my responses to situations. They're watching how I make decisions. They're watching how I interact and how I interface with people, and they are learning too the do's and don'ts without me directly saying it. And so that is ever before me, that even if somebody comes at me, how do I manage that situation? Because there's some other young people who are watching, who are leaders in their own rights, and depending on how I respond will influence how they will respond later
to
on.
a same or similar situation. So self-control.
So one of the things that has really been developed strongly inside of me as a leader is just a genuine love for people and an appreciation for people. And I find that that's the thing that really does drive me on a daily basis. So at first I entered a corporate environment and I was thinking, I want to be on the fast track and really progress and elevate. And inside of that I recognized, well, that's not God's primary purpose. He's placed me within a context because they're people that he cares about and he loves. And he wants me to be able to transmit that love and that care for them. And it's actually the thing that I'm centered on and gives me a lot of joy. So when I see people come in and they're mentored and they grow and develop and they're able to go out and they're empowered, that gives me a lot of satisfaction. And it really causes me to feel very fulfilled. And I find what you said about just really fulfilling God's purpose being very, very important. It's the thing that anchors us, because contentment flows out of that.
Yes.
And so inside of the difficulty, inside of the moments of isolation, inside of the times when we are just genuinely disappointed because we've been really working with someone and they're not coming up to the standard that we expect, there is the peace that comes from knowing that as long as we stay within God's purpose and we just execute things according to his will and his intent, all things will work together. So I just really, I'm very centered on just doing what he says inside of the leadership context that he's placed me.
Tonight has been an inspiring evening for me, and I know that you've garnered a lot of takeaways. So thank you for staying with us on the Paula Show. We continue to inspire, entertain, but most of all, transform behaviors. Have a good evening and goodbye.
The Paula Show is